Okay, so you want to own a racehorse. Picture it. It's the first Saturday in May. You're standing in a box at Churchill Downs, or maybe Ascot, in a suit that cost more than most people's rent, a mint julep sweating in your hand. Down on the track, the animal you own, this 1,000-pound engine of muscle and nerve, is being led into the gate. The crowd is 100,000 strong and buzzing. The bell rings. And for 2 minutes, everything you are is riding on the back of a 3-year-old with your silks on the jockey's shoulders. The horse hits the front, the announcer screams your colors. And when it crosses the wire first, people you've never met are chanting a name you chose. There's a trophy. There's champagne. There's a photo of you in the winner's circle that will hang in your study for the rest of your life. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet voice says, and this animal is now worth tens of millions at stud. That's the picture. That's what the movies sell you. That's what the glossy auction catalog, printed on paper thick as a wedding invitation, is designed to sell you. Here's the problem. Almost none of that happens. For the overwhelming majority of people who buy a racehorse, there is no winner's circle. There is a monthly invoice. There's a vet bill for a horse that hasn't raced in 4 months. There's a phone call that starts with, "So, the news isn't great." There's a beautifully bred animal standing in a stall costing you the price of a mortgage payment every 30 days, doing nothing, earning nothing, and quietly eating money like it's oats. And there's a very good chance that the horse you paid a fortune for will never win a single meaningful race in its life. So let me reframe the whole thing right now, because this is the sentence the industry doesn't put in the brochure. A racehorse is not really a sports business. It's not really an athletics business. It's a lottery ticket that you have to feed twice a day, insure, medicate, and pay rent on, for years, before you find out whether it's a winning ticket, and the ticket can die on you. Read that again. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly where the money goes, why the purchase price is almost the least important number in the entire equation, how the handful of people who actually get rich off racehorses are playing a completely different game than you think, and why the real money in this sport was never on the track at all. You'll understand the single mechanism that turns a losing athlete into a multi-million-dollar asset, and the single event that can wipe all of it out in about 90 seconds. Stick with me, because the counterintuitive part, the part that recontextualizes this entire business, comes right in the middle, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now, before we talk about money, we need to talk about what a racehorse actually is. Because racehorse is not one thing. It's a category hiding at least 3 completely different businesses wearing the same saddle. Some racehorses are thoroughbreds bred for the flat, the classic sprinters and milers and middle-distance runners you see at Churchill, at Santa Anita, at Ascot and Longchamp. Some are standardbreds, the harness racers that pull a little cart called a sulky around the track at a trot or a pace, a completely separate breed, a separate industry, separate economics. And some are quarter horses, built like linebackers, bred to explode down a straight quarter mile in under 22 seconds. 3 breeds. 3 worlds. 3 sets of numbers. And even inside the thoroughbred world, there's a fork in the road that matters more than the breed. Because a thoroughbred is either a racing prospect, an animal whose value comes from what it does on the track, or it's a breeding prospect, an animal whose value comes from what it can produce after it stops running. Those are not the same business. One is athletics. The other is genetics. And here's the thing you need to hold on to for the next 30 minutes. The second business is worth dramatically more than the first. We're going to focus on the flat racing thoroughbred, because that's the one you're dreaming about, that's the one in the Derby, and that's the one where the numbers get genuinely staggering in both directions. So let's start with the number everybody fixates on. The purchase price. Here's where the range is almost comically wide. You can buy a thoroughbred at the low end of a claiming race for around $5,000. You can walk into a lower-tier auction and pick up a yearling, a 1-year-old, too young to have ever raced, for a few thousand. But you can also walk into the Keeneland September yearling sale in Kentucky, the largest thoroughbred auction in the world, and watch a single untested yearling sell for $1 million, $2 million, $4 million. In 2006, at a Fasig-Tipton sale in Florida, one 2-year-old colt sold for $16 million. $16 million for an animal that had never started a race in its life. Hold that colt in your mind. We're coming back to him, and it's not a happy story. According to the Jockey Club, which maintains the breed registry for thoroughbreds in North America, the average price at the marquee yearling sales runs well into the six figures, and the median tells you that spending $100, $200, $300,000 on a horse that has never proven it can run is completely normal at that level. But here's the lesson, and it's the lesson that governs this entire video. The purchase price and the profitability are two totally different numbers, and they are barely related. A cheap horse can bankrupt you slowly. An expensive horse can bankrupt you faster. Paying more does not buy you a winner. It buys you a more expensive maybe. The auction price is the down payment on a decade of costs, and the horse doesn't know or care what you paid for it. Which brings us to the part nobody budgets for. The hidden infrastructure. The bleed. First, there's training. Your horse cannot race itself. It lives at a training barn under a licensed trainer, and that trainer charges you a day rate, a flat fee, every single day, whether the horse runs or not, whether it's healthy or injured, whether it's brilliant or hopeless. At a mid-level American track, that day rate runs around $75 to $120 a day. At the premier barns in New York or California, it's more. Do the arithmetic. $100 a day is $36,500 a year per horse before the horse has earned a nickel. Before a single race. Before a single win. Second, there's the medical side, and it's relentless. Horses are enormous, fragile, and accident-prone. You've got routine veterinary care, you've got the farrier that's the specialist who trims the hooves and fits the shoes, and a racehorse needs new shoes roughly every month. You've got joint injections, you've got scoping, you've got ultrasounds, you've got the emergency call at 2 in the morning. Realistically, add several thousand to well over $10,000 a year on vet and farrier alone, and far more the instant something goes wrong. Third, there's transport, and this is the one people never see coming. Horses don't drive. To get your horse from the barn to the track, from Kentucky to New York, from one meet to the next, you're paying for equine shipping vans for short hauls, and for the big international campaigns, actual chartered aircraft. A cross-country van trip can run you a few $1,000s a pop, and if you're flying a horse to Dubai or Royal Ascot, you're into 5 figures each way. Every trip. Every time. Fourth, there's insurance, and here's where the fragility of the whole thing becomes a line item. Mortality insurance, a policy that pays out if your horse dies, typically costs somewhere between 2.5% and 5% of the horse's insured value every year. So a horse you value at $1 million costs you $25,000 to $50,000 a year just to insure against the very real possibility that it drops dead. Read that again. You are paying, annually, the price of a new car, purely to hedge against your athlete not surviving the year. That tells you something about the risk profile of this animal before we've even gotten to the racing. Add it all up. Training, vet, farrier, transport, insurance, registration, jockey fees, entry fees, the trainer's percentage of any winnings, and the widely cited all-in figure to keep one thoroughbred in serious training runs somewhere from around $50,000 to well over $100,000 a year. Per horse. Indefinitely. And that is the number that quietly ends most people's racing careers, because they budgeted for the purchase and forgot that the purchase was the cheap part. Okay, so. Now here's where it gets interesting. Here's the mechanism that recontextualizes the entire business, and I want you to slow down with me, because if you only take one idea away from this video, make it this one. You are not, primarily, in the business of winning races. Let me say that in a way that sounds insane and then make it obviously true. The prize money, the purses, for the vast majority of horses will never come close to covering what you spend. Racing purses are real, and at the top they're enormous, but the pyramid is brutally steep. A tiny fraction of horses ever win a stakes race. Most horses that make it to the track win little or nothing that matters. If your entire business model is win enough prize money to profit, you have, statistically, already lost. The purse is not the product. So what is? The product is breeding rights. The product is genetics. The entire, and I mean the entire, economic logic of the elite end of this sport is that a racehorse is a machine for establishing the value of its own DNA. Winning races is not the goal. Winning races is the marketing. Every victory, every Grade 1 win, every classic, is data, proof of concept, that raises the price of the one thing that actually generates the fortune, the horse's ability to reproduce. Because here's the counterintuitive core. A great racehorse might earn a few $1,000,000 in prize money across its entire career on the track. That same horse, retired to stud, can earn that much in a single breeding season and keep doing it for 15 or 20 years. That's not an athletics business. That's a genetics licensing business wearing a saddle. Let that land for a moment. Now let's talk about how the money actually comes in, because it arrives in distinct layers, and most people only ever see the first one. The first layer is purse money. Your horse runs, your horse places, you collect a share of the prize pool, minus the cut that goes to the trainer and the jockey. Real money, occasionally spectacular money at the top, but for most owners, a trickle that never fills the bucket. The second layer is the horse's residual sale value as an athlete. If your horse shows talent, other people will pay to buy it, or to buy a share of it, based on what it might do next. You can buy a promising 3-year-old and sell it at a profit purely on its racing upside. That's flipping, essentially, trading the animal like an appreciating asset while it's still competing. The third layer, and this is the big one, is stud value, breeding rights. When a successful male horse, a colt, retires, he stands at stud, which simply means he's made available to breed with mares, and each mating is a paid transaction called a stud fee or a covering fee. A truly elite stallion can command a stud fee in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per mare. Into Mischief, one of the most in-demand American stallions of recent years, has stood at a fee reported around $250,000. Now multiply. A popular stallion can cover well over 100, sometimes over 200 mares in a single breeding season. Do that math. 200 mares at $200,000 is $40 million. In 1 year. From one animal. Standing in a field in Kentucky, doing the one thing he most wants to do anyway. That is the layer that makes the whole absurd economy make sense. And there's a fourth layer for the females, the broodmares. A mare's value comes from her produce, from the foals she can carry and raise. A well-bred mare who throws a champion becomes an asset that appreciates with every winner she produces, and her yearlings sell at auction for the kind of numbers we talked about earlier. The mare is a factory, the stallion is a franchise, and the racing is the ad campaign that sets the price for both. So far, so good. But before you go remortgaging the house, let's talk about the recurring bleed, the operating cost, the part that never stops. Everything I described in the infrastructure section isn't a one-time hit. It's a subscription. That $50,000 to $100,000 annual cost per horse runs every year the horse is in training, whether the horse is winning, losing, injured, or just standing there being beautiful and useless. There's the feed and the bedding and the labor, grooms, exercise riders, hot walkers, the humans who care for the animal around the clock. There's the ongoing veterinary maintenance that only intensifies as the horse's body takes the pounding of training. There are the entry fees and the nomination fees to keep the horse eligible for the big races, which for the classics have to be paid, in some cases, before the horse is even born. There are property taxes and insurance and repairs if you're mad enough to own the farm yourself. And through all of it, the day rate ticks and ticks and ticks. The barn gets paid first. You get paid last, if at all. And now the part where it can all break. The risk. Because here's the trap. Every single number I've given you assumes one thing, that the horse stays sound and stays alive. And a racehorse is, biologically, a catastrophe waiting to happen. You have taken an animal that weighs 1,000 pounds, balanced it on 4 ankles roughly the width of a human wrist, and asked it to run 40 miles an hour while a human being crouches on its spine. The forces going through those legs are enormous. A single misstep, one bad stride on one bad piece of ground, can fracture a leg, and unlike almost any other athlete, a horse with a badly broken leg often cannot be saved, because a horse cannot lie still to heal and cannot survive off its feet. The most famous horses in the world have died this way in front of millions of people. So the volatility here isn't like a stock that drops 10%. The volatility is binary. Your asset can go, in the space of a few strides, from a multi-million-dollar breeding prospect to a total loss and an insurance claim. There's injury that ends a career without ending a life, the tendon that never comes back, the chip in the knee, the horse that simply turns out to be slow. There's illness. There's the fact that talent is largely undiscoverable until you've already spent the money, because you cannot know if a yearling can run until you train it and race it, by which point the bills are already deep into six figures. And layered on top of all of it is the market itself, which is cyclical. Auction prices swell in booms and collapse in recessions, so the horse you bought at the top of the market may be worth a fraction of that when you try to sell at the bottom. The whole thing is leverage on a living animal. Now, remember that $16 million colt I asked you to hold in your mind? Let me tell you what happened to him, because he is the entire lesson in a single animal. His name was the Green Monkey. In February of 2006, at a 2-year-old's in-training sale in Florida, two of the most powerful ownership operations in the world, the Coolmore Syndicate and Sheikh Mohammed's Godolphin, got into a bidding war over one gray colt. He had a magnificent pedigree. He traced back to the legendary sire Northern Dancer, and he'd blazed a workout so fast that the room lost its mind. The bidding climbed past 10 million, past 12, past 14, and finally stopped at $16 million. At the time, the most ever paid for a thoroughbred at public auction. The buyers were betting, exactly as we discussed, not on prize money, but on the future stud value of a horse that looked like a superstar in waiting. On paper, the logic was flawless. Here's what actually happened. The Green Monkey had persistent physical problems. His debut got pushed back again and again. When he finally made it to the track, he ran 3 times in his entire career. He never won. His best finish was a third. And the total prize money this $16 million animal earned on the racetrack, across his whole life, was $10,440. Read that again. 16 million in, 10,000 out. He was quietly retired to stud, where, without a racing record to sell, his covering fee started at around $5,000, a rounding error against his purchase price. The rise was the workout and the auction and the dream. The decline was 3 unremarkable races. And the lesson is the coldest one in the entire sport. You cannot buy certainty in a living animal, and no pedigree, no workout, no $16 million price tag can make a horse run fast if the horse simply won't. The two most sophisticated buyers on earth, with unlimited money and the best information available, still couldn't tell in advance. That's not bad luck. That's the business. So how does anybody win at this? Because people clearly do. There are dynasties in this sport. Which brings us to the deeper game. Here's where the sophisticated money separates itself from the dreamers. The people who consistently win at thoroughbred ownership are almost never trying to profit off a single horse. They're running a portfolio. They own dozens, sometimes hundreds of animals, knowing with total clarity that most will lose money and a tiny few will produce all the returns. They're not buying lottery tickets one at a time and praying. They're buying the whole book, because they understand that this is a game of rare, enormous outliers, and you cannot catch an outlier if you only take one swing. And they don't make their money on the track. They make it in the breeding shed. The real fortunes, the Coolmores, the Godolphins, the Great American Farms, are vertically integrated genetics companies. They buy or breed a colt, they use racing to build his reputation, and then they retire him to stud and sell his DNA hundreds of times a year for decades. The racing is customer acquisition. The stud farm is the recurring revenue. There's another layer of sophistication most people never see: syndication. Instead of one person owning a stallion, the horse is divided into shares. Back in 1973, the Immortal Secretariat was syndicated for a then-record $6 million, 32 shares at $190,000 each, before he'd even finished his racing career. Each shareholder got the right to breed one mare to him every year. Spread the cost, spread the risk, and each share throws off breeding income on its own. The horse becomes a financial instrument that happens to have a heartbeat. And then there's the quiet part, the part the accountants love, the tax and lifestyle economics. For a certain kind of wealthy owner, a racing and breeding operation is a business that can generate depreciation and deductions, that diversifies a fortune into a hard, real asset, and that appreciates through bloodline value while delivering something no stock certificate ever will: the box at the Derby, the name in the program, the winner's circle, the entry into a world that money alone can't quite buy. For the sophisticated owner, some of the return was never meant to show up on the racing ledger at all. The prestige is part of the yield. So let's put real numbers on it and close this out the honest way. 2 scenarios. Same horse. Same owner. 2 different years. The good year. You've got one nicely bred colt in training. He costs you, say, $70,000 to campaign for the year. But he's talented. He wins a couple of races and hits the board in a stakes, and he banks, let's say, $300,000 in purses, minus the trainers and jockeys cut, call it a net well into 6 figures. And then the real payoff. His form makes him a legitimate stud prospect, and a breeding operation offers you several $1,000,000 for him at the end of the season. In 1 year, the dream and the math finally agree. You are, on this single animal, up several $1,000,000. This is the year that gets talked about at every auction, in every bar near every track, forever. This is the year that keeps the whole industry believing. The bad year. Same 70,000 in costs. But this colt is a step slow, and then he takes a bad step. A chip in the knee. Months off. More vet bills stacked on top of the day rate that never stopped. He comes back, runs mid-pack, earns a few $1,000s total, and shows nothing that would make anyone pay real breeding money for him. At year's end you've spent your 70, spent tens of thousands more in medical, earned almost nothing, and you own a soundish, slowish horse worth a fraction of what you paid. You are down 6 figures, and your only real decision is whether to spend another year hoping, or to drop him into a claiming race and let someone else inherit the bleed. And here's the quiet horror of it. The bad year is the normal year. The bad year is what happens to most horses, most owners, most of the time. The good year is the exception you're paying all those bad years for the right to maybe, someday, experience. So come back with me to that box on the first Saturday in May. The suit, the julep, the 100,000 voices, the animal with your colors on its back thundering toward the wire. That image is real. It happens. Someone stands in that winner's circle every single year, and the champagne is not a lie. But now you know what's underneath it. You know the day rate that ticked every morning for years to get that horse to the gate. You know the vet bills and the insurance premium hedging against the animal's own body. You know that the prize money almost never covers the cost, and that the $16 million horse can earn $10,000 and break your heart, and that the 2 smartest buyers in the world couldn't see it coming. You know that the fortune, when it comes, doesn't come from the 2 minutes on the track. It comes from the 20 years in the breeding shed after. You know that the winners aren't the ones with the best horse. They're the ones with the deepest book, the longest patience, and the clearest understanding of what they're actually buying. Because the race isn't really the business. The bloodline is.